All right, this is Ron from R.Shea Brewing. We are at Canal Place on the eve of another release. And we brought in a special guest today just for a little bit more back and forth, because I know you guys get tired of seeing my pretty face every week. So we brought Rob to the lid. And in case you guys don't know, but I'm pretty sure most of you do, he is the founder of the Northeast Ohio Craft Brewery news page and the associated group, which is one of the dominant Ohio Facebook pages where people, talk about everything craft beer. And he's been doing it for, I think, 4 years, but I'm gonna let him take it away, just kind of give a little introduction on that page and where it is now and what he likes about the industry.
Yeah, great, thank you. Northeast Ohio Craft Brewery News. It started in about 2016, so about 5 years coming up on. It was really just born of a conversation with a local beer journalist. Everybody's probably real familiar with Rick Armand. Had a conversation one day on Facebook Messenger, just back and forth, talking about beer a little bit, and got to talking, and he said, once upon a time, I knew every single brewer in the state of Ohio, and now there's so many breweries opening up that I just can't keep up with it unless somebody contacts me and says, hey, I'm opening a brewery. I don't have time to write an article on them. I don't have time to track them down to do all that legwork. And so, I just thought there's an opportunity here for someone else to step in and kind of help cover the industry a little bit. And it's just a side hobby of mine a little bit. I really like craft beer and always been interested in just getting out into tap rooms, meeting brewers, and I homebrew myself, just total beer geek all the way around, and just thought this is a good way that I can kind of help out a little bit. So kind of quickly blew up over 2 or 3 years, and now it's pretty close to 11,000 followers, and the associated group is about 6,400 page members.
Oh, and if you're not familiar with the Facebook associated group of the Northeast Ohio Craft Brewery News, if you're new to craft beer or you just want to follow what's new coming out or being released on a weekend in one place, that's the place to do it. Everyone's in the know. They post what they're drinking, they like, they don't like about it, where they get it. It's a great group where you can just learn a lot of the current events in one place.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's the overwhelming thing about it for me is that it's an overwhelmingly positive group, and people generally tend to police themselves. There's not a lot of people pooing on other people's tastes in beer or whatever. It's just people sharing the beer that they like and telling where to get it, and not a lot of opinions, negative or otherwise. It's generally a very positive page.
Okay. So I brought Rob here to kind of co-review, and he hasn't had this beer yet because it just got canned about 2 hours ago. We were running a day late, equipment issues by the canners, but it got canned. But it's our third pastry stout, the first two being COVID series pastry stouts, but it's our third one. And looking just for something different on these reviews, and what we're doing differently is putting QR codes on the cans that's going to go directly to this YouTube review once it's edited. So the goal was, as we got out in distribution more outside of Summit County, people don't really know us, and a lot of people are drinking this beer outside of Summit County for the first time without even knowing our story or the Valley location. So just, we like social media a lot. This seemed like a brilliant way to allow consumers to get a quick education about the people and the product, and they can link to other content. So this will be that first step. It's a little bit scary because we don't know how many people are going to go on a QR code and click, but ever since COVID happened, you go to a restaurant and you want the menu, and it's all QR code now. So luckily people have been educated on what the hell is a QR code and how do I use it.
Just used it myself last week. I was down in Columbus for work, and brewers down in that area, and went into Old Tang River Brewing. I don't know if you've ever been there, and just outside of the Polaris Mall. Same thing, walked up to the bar, was looking for a paper menu. A lot of places just don't have them with COVID, and she handed me a QR code, I just scanned it, and the menu came right up the screen, so it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and usually, when I was a little bit younger back in the day, you had to download a QR code reader, and nothing was really integrated with your phone. so I never really used it, but now on the new phones, it's automatic. It's seamless. You just point your camera, finds the square, and you go to the website. So, asking Rob here, I didn't even ask him, does he even like pastry stouts?
That's like
And assuming you do, what are some of your favorites that you've had recently?
Oh man. Recently, I'm trying to think. There's been a bunch. Yours? I mean, certainly. Trying to think. Hubbard's Cave out of Chicago has made some really good ones. Man, put me on the spot there.
Are there any dessert combinations that resonate with you?
This really resonated with me. When you told me this was the beer that we were going to be trying today, yeah.
So this is a peanut butter Oreo double imperial oatmeal pastry stout. And we've been doing a lot of, during COVID, we've been doing a lot of can releases in the valley on lab rats and with the cans, since nobody could come in and have a conventional lab rat. We used to not have to go, it was just in-house. So we started canning them, and we were getting into, my two sons love Oreos, and now there's themed Oreos with everything, all these different flavor combinations. So we just maybe Oreo's got something with these combinations. Let's see how they should work perfectly in a pastry stout, but they kind of work pretty damn well.
That's awesome. I think we should try it.
So that's kind of how this one came about. And on the heels of our last two COVID releases, once COVID happened, our first COVID themed release was our saving grace, if you remember. That was a double imperial fluffernutter. And we've done fluffernutters before. We amped it up to about 12%. And that was our very first COVID release when everything was shut down and we were selling beer outside of the corner of the building. We released another one, light containment, a month or two after, which was a double chocolate hazelnuts, kind of playing on the COVID theme. We're in the light containment phase, then there's going to be the heavy containment phase, then this will magically be over right around July. So the COVID timeline really didn't follow our COVID beer release timeline, it just kept going. So whatever. So that's what we are reviewing today. Initially, do you have any questions about when I sent you this, the art? Any questions that came to your mind? The name?
Yeah, the name. Let's get into that.
The name?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Dune or anybody?
Familiar
The
with it?
1984 Dune movie?
Oh yeah. The original one was Sting.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that was a movie I grew up with because of that needle
Yes.
that was flying through the air to get him. That scared the hell out of me. So that's
pretty based out of it.
And there's a character in it, Shaddam IV. He was the Padishah Emperor of the universe, and he was plotting to kill Duke Atreides because he thought he was a threat. And I've watched the movie again, and I'm always making notes on possible beer names to just have ready to go. And Emperor of the Known Universe, that's
pretty close.
That's a powerful beer name.
Definitely.
And it's been shelved away, and coming out with a pastry stout with peanut butter and Oreos, I'm like, this one could fit the bill.
Needs a big name.
So,
beer needs a big name.
So definitely watch the 84 version of that movie. It's a great sci-fi classic.
Did it creep you out as much rewatching it as an adult as it did watching it as a kid?
That scene still does. Because it's a first person point of view of somebody doing operating this drone needle that's going to stab him in the neck. So, but great movie. And now the label art, I pretty much gave the name to our designer, and I really had no concept. Like, go with it. And it was like pull the pin out of a grenade and run, because I had no concept, but he came out with it pretty good.
It's awesome.
So why a pastry stout? We've been doing a lot of pastry stouts in the valley. When we started in 2014, we kind of became known as Stout. And doing good stouts and also flavor combinations. It was only up until recently that we've kind of been doing decently at New England's and double New England's, and then it goes to sours. So ever since COVID happened, that's been like our trio of our releases, because when COVID happened and you don't have any draft sales, which is your margin, and you go to a can-only model, you've got to make margin. And usually, if it's a normal beer, you make no money on a can. You rely on the draft or your taproom sales, but you had none. So we had to completely reformulate for the COVID releases big beers. You know, go big or go home. Because we were a relatively less than 1 year old operation with a whole lot of bills. And we were throwing everything at the wall. So this is one of the styles that we upped a lot of our lab rats, because we've had all that historical data of what people have liked in the valley, what they didn't like, what they'd like to tweak as far as the flavor. And this was one of them that we lab ratted during early COVID, and they loved it. So,
Very highly rated on tap too, if I recall.
yeah, so we let's scale this up. All right, let's talk about the stats of this beer. This is a 12% double oatmeal imperial stout, and we've got some grains here. Last couple of reviews, I've been talking about the grains that go in this beer. This beer uses pretty much all of these. We started out with about 75% Pilsner malt base, and we've instead of pale or brewer's malt, which is a little bit cheaper, we noticed in the valley that Pilsner just ferments out just a little bit better for us. And when you're making a big stout, it's at 12%. It's challenging to get it to ferment to 12%, because the more alcohol it is, the more the yeast don't like to ferment. And then to not take it too dry to offer some residual sweetness to the pastry stout type of a flavor profile. So we got 75% of this. We've got 3 different types of crystal malts. You can see varies in color and flavor. Those lend unfermentable sugars to just give it mouthfeel and body and some color. You can't just use all crystal malts in a black stout. And then we have about 10% chocolate malt. So that gives it its dark appearance. And it's a smooth chocolate. It's not like a typical stout acidity. And we throw in a little bit of roasted barley. That's usually part of all stout recipes. And it can vary widely. Or if you're making an Irish stout, it's usually 90%, base malt, 10% roasted barley, and that's it. Just super simple. This, it's a Scotch at 2%, just for some more color, and to give it some of that classic stout acidity flavor. But with an oatmeal stout, the star is kind of the oats for oatmeal. So we're running this about 9%. It'll give it the creaminess that you really want for a pastry stout. So we released a recent, just a regular seasonal chocolate coffee stout, which pretty much was these grains, no roasted barley. It was just chocolate base and some crystals, and it's an entirely different mouthfeel type of a beer.
That's one thing I've always liked about your stouts is the great mouthfeel. So, what do you do? For me, I like a stout that's kind of thick and chewy, right? I don't really like a thin, watery stout. And yours are very, very thick and have a very great mouthfeel. What special grains do you use that really kind of brings out that? You talk about the oatmeal, helping with the body. Is there anything else in terms of the special grain that you add?
Yeah, besides the oatmeal, it's the crystal malts. They're not in a lot of percent, about 4% total, but your spectrum of crystal malts is crystal 20, 40, 60, 80, 120. The higher the number, the more roasted it is, and the more unfermentables it'll give. Like crystal 120, you'll get like a lot of raisin, fig type of flavors, whereas the crystal 20 will just start to get some of those, nutty flavors, some of the residual sweetness. But that's it. So those with the oats, it'll be the crystals that give it that thick, mouthfeel. And it's also the mash temperature. That's the other big tool we have to control fermentables. If you know, combine your oats with water at the lower end of the temperature, like 140 degrees, that'll create more fermentable sugars, so the beer will go more dry. If you do it at like 155 degrees or 160, the very top end, you'll get a lot more unfermentable residual sugars that the yeast just won't eat because they're too long chain or too complicated, but we'll perceive that as mouthfeel, chewiness, and body. So we use that to control, you know, those aspects of the mouthfeel.
Awesome.
And to some extent, the yeast will play more of a minor role. Some yeast will ferment out a little bit more. They'll give it an extra percent or two. They'll attenuate down a little more, and some don't. So we've kind of, in the beginning in the valley, making our carbon black base, which we use for a lot of our twig sheets. That was a tough beer to initially make. I didn't do imperial stouts as a home brewer, or ones that big, and just learning. You need a lot of yeast. Don't short yourself on yeast. That's the other difficult part of this. It requires, yeast propagation, a lot of oxygen during the initial stages to build up to a mass of yeast that will handle all that sugar, because it's such a big beer. And it's been a lot of trial and error. This is pretty much 5 years of experience going into this. Because when we started the COVID releases into the pastries, jumping from 9.25% to 12 doesn't sound like much, but you're almost there.
Right.
But it's a whole lot more different.
Yes.
There's a lot more grain. There's so much. It pretty much maxes out the entire system.
Yeah.
So
I tried 12% on a home brew scale once, and it didn't go so well for me.
yeah. That's probably why I never made stouts on a home brew scale. The first stout I got a kit from the Grape and Granary was, I went too big. I went with this big stout with cherry and this and that. Then I was still using my parents' well water. And I wasn't into chemistry as much then, and yeah, that didn't turn out well.
My experience was in the middle of January. It was freezing cold, and I decided to do a 12% Mexican hot chocolate stout.
Okay.
By myself. Sometimes I brew with friends when I brew, but this one was my first solo all grain batch. And the malt bill was almost 29 pounds. Brewing bag in a 15-gallon kettle.
Yeah.
And I had just sprained my ankle playing basketball 2 weeks earlier, so I was hobbling around on one crutch. So imagine me with one good leg, trying to lift this 29-pound bag out of my brew kettle.
Yeah. Which is full of water.
Yeah. So it wasn't real well planned out.
Yeah, let's see. 29 pounds of grain? Yeah, that's a heavy bag. That was at least 50 pounds of grain and water.
Yeah, brutal.
Did it come out okay?
It actually did. I had to do some things to get, the amount of sugars that I wanted to get to 12. I had to add a bunch of molasses and some other things. But it took a while to get there. It actually was probably to this date one of the best beers I've ever made.
Okay. Now, and speaking about different sugars for these stouts, with these big stouts, a lot of times you'll find yourself not able to hit your target gravity, hence you got to find other sugars to add in that complement the beer. We routinely do a mix between just straight corn sugar, dextrose, which is an easy fermenter, that'll help the dryness, and then they make a dry malt extract, which replicates the mash process. They remove the water, you get the mash complex sugars, but it's a lot more expensive, about twice the amount of a regular sugar per bag. But we've been playing with those in various proportions to get that dryness or chewiness balance that you want. So, it's time to try this beer out. So this has been freshly canned about 2 to 3 hours ago. Just pulled it from the cooler about 30 minutes. So it should be in the mid-50s. smell peanut butter from here.
Oh my gosh. Smells amazing. That's fantastic. That's really good. So now the peanut butter, is it, the peanut butter comes straight from just the Oreos, or did you use?
So if you've been in Akron a couple of weeks ago and visited a bunch of supermarkets, you'll see a big open space unfilled in the peanut butter aisle or the Oreo aisle. No, I'm just playing. But no, they're two separate ingredients.
Okay.
Along with the chocolate malt. So it's not peanut butter Oreos, but
Got it.
yeah. So you can balance too much of something, not enough of the other, then you get both of them, something more dominant, something comes in at the end.
No, it's really well balanced. Really balanced. Yeah, I was just gonna ask, how do you, in a big beer like this, when there's so many flavors, peanut butter, Oreo, how do you keep that balance without one of the flavors overriding the other, to where the peanut butter drowns out the Oreo, you can't taste it, or vice versa?
No, and this one has,
Other than trial and error.
no. And this is a 2-ingredient, which doing all of our lab rats in the valley, we've become accustomed to working with 2 ingredients. 3 is where it's dicey, and a lot of people is more too much of this, not enough this. 3 tends to get too complicated, but this being 2, it wasn't that bad. And it's based on a lot of history in the valley, lab rats and this or that, of using those ingredients separately. So we've got like a great, I guess, database of these type of ingredients used separately. So we made a few small batches, and we didn't really change much. But one of the weird things going from our 9 1/4 carbon black base that we flavored with, use twitchy for with coffee beans or other flavorings, to going to a bigger stout, like a 12%, say. So our light containment 11 1/4 chocolate hazelnut, that's based on regular chocolate hazelnut in the valley at 9 1/4%. But oddly enough, counterintuitively, you make a bigger stout, which kind of you naturally get a thicker body, more unfermentables. You don't need as much of that other flavor or adjunct or chocolate malt or whatever you're using to get that flavor. You actually got to pare it back, which we had a few snafus at the beginning when we started these type of pastry stouts. We were just using, like, we formulated a 9 1/4% beer. That's where we started. But the flavors were overwhelming, so we just had, we significantly pared it back as much as 50% because it's already so thick in the mouthfeel that you just have to push those flavors back. So no, it was very counterintuitive. It's good for the bottom line of this expensive beer because it's expensive enough to make.
Sure.
So, but no, for me, I get the peanut butter on the aroma predominantly. You kind of get that cookie Oreo and the filling just subtly in the background, whereas I taste the Oreo and the filling, the cookie filling, a little bit more on the taste end.
Yeah, definitely get the peanut butter in those big time. You can almost taste the cream filling in the center of the Oreo.
Mm-hmm.
That's real good.
So no, and a couple of pairings for this is for food pairings, chicken, ham. The ham would be good, a little bit of saltiness to just kind of cleanse your palate in between sips, possibly. And she's pairing triple cream spread, which is extra cream added to the milk when they make the cheese like a soft cheese, like a brie on turbo. So, do you eat anything when you have a pastry stout? Do you pair it with anything, or is it more of a after dinner, I'm all done, just in front of the TV or whatever?
I could see it both ways, to be honest with you. For me, it's probably a sipping beer. Like 12%, this is probably going to be the lone beer that I have that day. And I'm just going to probably sip it standalone over the course of 2 hours and just let it warm and let all those flavors really come out. But I could easily see this paired with another dessert, a big bowl of vanilla ice cream or something. Would be delicious with something like this.
Okay. Or maybe a float.
Ooh, there's an idea.
Float some vanilla ice cream in a
There's an idea.
kind of this.
You're welcome.
So that is this review. Did you have any other questions or anything that comes to mind?
I don't think so.
So this is going to be released when you see this today at 11 a.m. I've got a lot of editing work to do tonight, but it should go well. And it'll be on draft. We got 2 kegs of it for draft and about 4 layers of cases for here, and everything else will go down into distribution. The one good thing about lifting the curfew and everything that we are seeing, and I hope a lot of other breweries are seeing, is keg sales are starting to accelerate big time, to the point that we can't keep up because we were expecting this demand and all of a sudden they want the same amount of cans, then a bunch of kegs. We're not complaining, none of us brewers are complaining, but we're kind of like, we don't have enough fermenters to fill this growing volume as we get back to normal, because we had everything spaced out by then, but no, we were lucky. Our distributor got, I believe, 30 sixtels of this, so it may be out in some local bars. I was surprised. It's a more expensive beer, so when you're at your local bar, they'll probably serve it in 10 or 13 ounces, and it's going to be a little bit pricier, but no, that was surprising.
Worth
so
it. Worth it.
You never know what they're going to buy or who wants to sell what. So that is it. So thanks a lot for coming down at pretty much short notice. I only texted them a couple of days ago.
Thanks for having me.
But no, it's been a treat. Thanks.